Evening. Welcome to the October 3rd, 2022 Troy City Council meeting. This evening we're honored to have Elder Isaac Sims from the Troy Seventh-day Adventist Church to provide our invocation. So please rise for that invocation and remain standing for our Pledge of Allegiance. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here. Please bow your heads with me. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the many blessings that you have bestowed upon us. Thank you for this fine community of Troy, Michigan, and we ask for your blessing upon it. Please be with each council member here and those in leadership positions, and please give them wisdom, the kind of wisdom that only comes from you. Please give them discernment to make good decisions for the benefit and betterment of this community. We ask for a special blessing upon our first responders, our firefighters, police officers, medical practitioners, and those who selflessly serve this community. And we ask for a special blessing upon the teachers who educate the children. Please be with them and provide them with wisdom and guidance. And we ask for a blessing upon each resident and those who are here. And may this community be a beacon of light to those around it, and please may you bless each one. We pray all of these things in Jesus' name, amen.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Sims.
Thank you.
The October 3rd, 2022 Troy City Council meeting is officially called to order, and I'll ask for the roll call for Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Baker?
Here.
Councilmember Abraham?
Here.
Councilmember Brooks?
Here.
Councilmember Chamberlain-Krenga?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Erickson-Galt? Here. Councilmember Hamilton?
Here.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Here.
All present this evening. First up on the agenda, certificates of recognition and special presentations. We have two this evening. C1 is a proclamation celebrating the Michigan Youth Volunteering Alliance. So I see several of you here for that. I'd ask that you join me down at the podium and I'll present the proclamation into the record. Come on up, come on up. How are you? Good to see you. Very good. Come face that way. Good representation. Not all of you tonight. So the Michigan Youth Volunteering Alliance is a great group of students, obviously, here in Troy. I had the pleasure of getting to meet probably, I think, everybody here and a few more as well a few weeks ago. Actually, it was probably a couple months ago, a month and a half ago now, when they had their kind of a banquet and they gave out some awards. And I met with them and I said, oh, you know what? You have to come before City Council so we can present you with this proclamation, because it's really important to hear about the work they're doing in our community. And as such, I'm going to read this proclamation into the record. Just as a heads up to all of you, I do have one of these for each of you. I don't have it with me today, but you will each get one, and then those who are not here also will get them. But you're all meant, a bunch of the names are mentioned here, all the groups. So you'll each get one of these. I'm going to give you just the one for today for the presentation, though, okay? All right. And then you'll have an opportunity to speak. Okay. So this is a proclamation celebrating the Michigan Youth Volunteering Alliance. Whereas the Michigan Youth Volunteering Alliance, or MYVA, is a group of aspiring individuals aiming to bring a positive change to the lives of citizens in their communities and to motivate other youth to do the same. And whereas MYVA provides many volunteering opportunities for young people ages 8 to 17 and sincerely wish to inspire as many people as possible to contribute to the same causes and to help Michigan Youth Volunteering Alliance expand and improve society. And whereas from September 2020, the MYVA members successfully volunteered for 448 hours. They are a proud recipient of the Heartwarming Project Grant from Youth Service America and recipients of National Community Service Awards, Ambassador Awards. And whereas projects the MYVA members worked on in 2020 included the Troy Nature Center Fall Cleanup, Animal Rescue Donation Drive, Can and Bottle Drive, Meals on Wheels deliveries, raking leaves for seniors, putting together Care House DIY cleaning kits, virtual tutoring, treats for troops, and virtual reading to children. And whereas in 2021, the MYVA members delivered supplies to animal shelters, conducted food donation drives, delivered food to local food banks, including Gleaners and Forgotten Harvest, held a toy wrapping event, adopted a road cleanup, raked leaves for seniors, delivered Meals on Wheels, participated in Global Youth Day by holding a food drive for Zaman International, and completing a Hershey's Grant project, collected candy for soldiers, and wrapped toys for children with cancer. And whereas in 2022, the MYVA members continued with delivering Meals on Wheels, held a winter coat drive, and will continue with many additional projects throughout the rest of this year. MYVA also provides financial literacy programs for their members to promote financial responsibility and independence among youth. Participants learn how to manage a checking account, create a budget, save and invest, start small businesses, and pay for college. And whereas special recognition, sincere thanks, and commendation is due to the MYVA members, all who are listed in this proclamation, now, therefore, be it resolved that the Mayor and the City Council of Troy hereby applaud and congratulate the Michigan Youth Volunteering Alliance members for their dedication to making our world a better place by donating their time and talents to many local nonprofit organizations. And be it further resolved that the Mayor and the City Council of the City of Troy invite all residents to recognize and celebrate the commitment and dedication of the Michigan Youth Volunteering Alliance and thank them for all they have done and will continue to do for the Troy community and beyond. So this proclamation is presented this third day of October 2022. It's signed by myself as the Mayor, and all members of Troy City Council have also signed it. Like I said, this is one of them. There's going to be one for each of you. And I'm going to present it to you formally, and I'm going to say congratulations to all of you and thank you for coming tonight. Please applaud for it. We'll pose for a quick picture. Yeah. Please introduce yourself when you come up and go ahead and please share a little bit.
Thank you. So good evening, everyone. I am Nidhi Kurthi, a co-founder of MIVA. First, I would like to thank the Troy City Council and Mayor Ethan Baker for giving MIVA this opportunity. It is a great honor and a proud moment for all the members of MIVA. I am Nidhi Kurthi, a co-founder of MIVA, and MIVA is a nonprofit organization that was started in August of 2020, and so far we have collectively over 45 members. Our vision is to positively impact people's lives and encourage others to do the same. We plan to do this by utilizing the potential of the youth by engaging them in volunteering and honing their teamwork skills. We would want to thank all of our youth volunteers for your tireless commitment and dedication to our mission in MIVA. Thank you so much again, Mr. Ethan Baker and members of the City Council for this recognition.
Again, thank you all so much. Really, the City Council, we are so proud of our youth volunteers, especially in this city. We know that this is what makes our community such a wonderful community, and it also makes some of us who have been around for a while doing stuff feel so good to know that there's a young group of people who are coming up and volunteering and doing great work. So thank you again, and really honored to have you here tonight. And of course, when I got to see you last time I saw you at the event. Plus, that cake you had was amazing. Is the mom who made the cake here? She was so good. That was so good. There we go. we love cake. But anyway, thank you so much. MIVA's a great organization, and I'm sure, I know you're on social media, so anyone who wants to get involved or help contribute in any way to anything they're doing, look at them up. I know for sure on Instagram. Instagram?
Yeah.
All right, looking for them on Instagram. They'll help you out. But thank you all. That concludes C1. Go ahead and next up is C2. It's a legislative update by State Representative Padma Kupa, who I saw came in. And I'm sure she's glad she got to see this presentation because she knows MIVA well as well. So welcome, Representative.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. Good evening, council members, everyone who's watching, and those of you in the audience. I haven't come here to do one lately because, as you know, we haven't had a lot going on in the legislature until the last 2 weeks. First of all, My name is Padma Kupa, for anyone who doesn't know. I'm the state representative for the cities of Troy and Clawson, which is currently Michigan's 41st House District, and I will be serving you all through the end of the year. Some of my legislative updates include what's going on with legislation, new budget appropriations, which is one of the main reasons I thought today was a good day to do this, and also we have some members of the audience who are also probably going to talk about it, but the I-75 noise mitigation, which we have both money for the sound study that's being spent, but also tax dollars that have been allocated to fixing it. So let me first start off by saying every month I've been having office hours at the Troy Community Center. People have come. I really want to give thanks to our city clerk, Ms. Dixon, because someone came with some disinformation or misinformation about the accuracy of their getting a ballot, or they got an absentee, and Ms. Dixon actually helped me clarify that very quickly. I was actually delayed in getting her that information about our election processes. My office hours are always the fourth Monday of the month. This past month of September, my office hours were on the start of both a Jewish and a Hindu holiday, but because I did not want to change it, I went ahead with it, and we had some questions again about I-75. One thing that we haven't had is questions about DTE from so many Troy residents. It's more Clawson residents who have been asking, but I have been working closely with DTE, and if people are not able to get their issues resolved, they can reach out to my office. As far as legislation is concerned, I introduced an International Peace Day resolution, which the Troy Area Interfaith Group did. Was hoping to get back in time for that event, but unfortunately session went really late that evening, and they didn't even let me speak to the resolution, so I did it on Facebook Live. We have several pieces of legislation that have come from constituents that we've been working closely on this all over the summer with them during the summer. One of them actually came from a Troy High graduate about mental incapacitation and assault, sexual assault. And so I've been working with the Michigan Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence and other stakeholder groups. And we have some comments that came in from the Disability Network and the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, so we're incorporating that. I was not able to introduce that last week. Another one that we've been working on, thank you, Mayor Baker, for connecting me with the reporter who's from Troy that brought up the issue of a victim who had been given protection, but then her information was made public. Turns out that victim was actually from the area where I live, the neighborhood, and her child went to Hill Elementary. Discovered that we don't have any victims' compensation fund. Many other states do. We don't have any legislation around it, so I'm working with the Prosecuting Attorneys Association of Michigan, and again, other legal groups to see what we can do to introduce legislation. So far, we have not been able to introduce that because I'd like to make it a bipartisan package, and seeking a sponsor from the other side of the aisle has been difficult. We did introduce a maternal health package last week to introduce a doula scholarship fund. And then also in June, the last legislative package of legislation I introduced was a bipartisan college scholarship bill that would help alleviate some of the financial burden of going to college. Something that you all know that I've been advocating for that has yet to get a vote in the Judiciary Committee is Justice for Alley, or House Bill 4159 and 4160, still waiting. And then one of the great things that I had been advocating for that I think Mark Miller and I talked about it recently, city manager, that would appeal especially to those of you who are serving on MML's board, is there's a website called Save My City, M-I-C-I-T-Y. Save My City, one of the things that brought to light was that when we have a dip in the economy, that we are often across the state left without revenues to cover expenses. And so having a revenue sharing trust fund was something, or a rainy day fund, the way the schools have a rainy day fund, was very important to me. Worked with a number of organizations across the country and across the state. The legislation has been introduced by Representative Ellison and Representative Tisdale. And so hopefully we'll have some movement on creating a revenue sharing trust fund. What I've discovered this year is that it's very, very hard if the majority party does not want to move legislation forward, that we cannot move anything. And so I've done, the best I can to move legislation forward. Working across the aisle and working across the state, but your advocacy would mean a lot to me. So if you could, I can give you the specific bill numbers, but if you could advocate particularly for the revenue sharing trust fund, because we need fiscally healthy cities, because that makes it possible to have a fiscally healthy state. Last week, we passed a bipartisan budget supplemental package to fund economic development, deliver scholarships for higher education for students who are seeking higher education, and also seeking additional resources to support public safety. These investments will help us attract transformational projects in Michigan, creating high-quality jobs and also boosting our local economies. They'll help lower the cost of higher education for the vast majority of Michiganders and increase funding for law enforcement officer mental health. I supported the package's passage, which passed with pretty broad bipartisan support. Governor Whitmer is expected to sign the package and give it its final approval. I have more information on the package if you'd like me to keep going, or I can email you the details. And keep going? Okay. All right. So one of the big topics, as I mentioned, is that we need to attract business and we need to have good paying jobs where people don't have to do 3 jobs to make a living. The supplemental includes a significant deposit into the state's, it's called Soar Fund, and it stands for Strategic Outreach and Attraction Reserve. This funding has the potential to attract transformational economic development projects, like a battery plant on the west side of the state, and create thousands of new good-paying jobs in Michigan. The supplemental includes $496 million in future economic investment, $350 million for site development statewide, including grants to regional and local economic development organizations. So hopefully we will be able to seek some of those grants. Strategic site improvements and remediation and redevelopment for future projects. I know that there is a big landfill in Rochester that got a significant amount of money. So maybe you could speak with Mayor Barnett and find out how he did that too. Additionally, $27 million was granted for upgrades to secure investment from Hemlock Semiconductor, bringing the supply chain of chips back home to Michigan so that we have more local sourcing for chips here in the state. Regarding the cost of college tuition to make college more affordable and to grow Michigan's talent pool, the supplemental creates the Michigan Achievement Scholarship. And starting with the class of 2023, so any of you out here listening, high school graduates will be eligible for more financial aid from the state, up to $2,750 if they attend a community college annually, the $2,750 annually, $5,500 if they attend a public university per year, and then $4,000 per year if they attend a private college or university. Students will be eligible if their family demonstrates financial need when they complete the FAFSA, and it'll cover about 94% of students attending community colleges, 76% of students attending a public university, 79% of students attending a private college or university. We know that our EMS is on a shoestring, so one of the things that we've done is increase funding for first responders and particularly increase mental health resources for public safety professionals and law enforcement officers. This is an important investment that will promote public safety and also high quality services by supporting our officers' mental health. These 2 bills that we passed are Senate Bills 842 and 844. So now we come to the I-75 noise mitigation. We successfully advocated in the last round of budget, two rounds of budget, a supplemental budget ago, for $300,000 for a new sound study that would give areas impacted by the noise a renewed chance to qualify for sound mitigation measures. In continuing to work with state and federal partners, as well as fierce neighborhood advocates, we were able to secure an additional $4 million so far to implement any noise abatement that is deemed necessary by the sound study. And that sound study is supposed to be completed by the end of this calendar year. The Michigan Department of Transportation has expressed their commitment to citizen transparency and involvement in the sound study process, which is something my team and I are continuing to hold them to while we're preserving the safety of residents and the validity of the study. I do want to say, given my background as an engineer and understanding of the residents themselves, many of whom are also engineers, we're really being vocal and really outspoken on this issue with all the partners. We've actually spoken to Senator Stabenow's staff and also to Governor Whitmer's staff because we want them also to be aware that we can't repeat the study and end up with the same result. It has to, and part of the challenge is that the guidelines are set by the federal government, and the MDOT is just executing those existing guidelines. So we're trying to find ways of working with the federal level electeds and the Federal Department of Highway Safety Administration to figure out how we can actually make a difference. Finally, while we've been told that the House will not be meeting for session during the month of October and for the foreseeable future, I know that sometimes we get called back on a sudden basis, and so I may end up in Lansing. We have been continuing to provide constituent services, working with constituents on things ranging from visa issues that people have concerns about, elevating them to the federal level electeds, and also on unemployment and other questions they may have about legislation, whether it's moving forward or not. Auto no fault has been on a lot of people's mind. We are hoping that there will be something that moves. Again, don't know when, but we're waiting. If anyone wants to contact my office, if they have questions on these issues that I've talked about or any other state legislative issues, we're happy to respond. My email is padmakupa@house.mi.gov. The phone number is 517-373-1783. I also welcome people to drop by our next office hours, the October 28th from 4:30 to 6 at the Troy Community Center. Questions?
Thank you, Representative Kupa. Questions from council? You're easy to get a hold of, so we often ask questions.
Or do you say I'm
offline,
more
right?
annoying?
But,
Is that?
No, I will, I know you'll do it anyway, but as you learn more about when that sound study is happening, if you could just let us know. I might hear from the residents before I hear from anybody else because they're pretty dialed in as well. But I'm glad to hear that they're trying to do it by the end of the year. I'm also kind of glad I want them to do it after the leaves have fallen.
Yes.
I think that would be a much better time than originally I thought they were going to do it a little earlier, which didn't seem right to me. So, and I recognize all the challenges faced with that. And I know the residents they're actually experts now more than several of us are, I think, probably because they've done a lot. But to your point, they are a very vocal group and also a very, I'm trying to think of the right word. They come with a lot of tools themselves. They're very, very educated. They're very sophisticated is a good word. Councilmember Hoderick, right? They're in it. Some of them are sound experts themselves. So I am hopeful that that combination with the work from you and our other representatives will create something that gives some relief to this issue.
I actually spoke with a former state legislative assembly member from Maryland who is a civil engineer herself, and she understood what is going on. Former Assemblywoman Miller was a transportation engineer and had some knowledge about these issues. And so I'm hopeful that if I talk to colleagues across the country and across the state who are also seeing some of the noise mitigation issues in the clash between state and federal level policy, that we can fix it. So we need lawyers, but we need engineers. we all need to work together on this. I do want to also mention that we are in the middle of a 9-day festival of, it's called Navaratri, and I know some of you got last-minute invitations from the Bharatiya Temple. This is me speaking as a member of the community. Really appreciate Mayor Pro Tem Galt coming out. I encourage all of you to come out. Next time we will be make sure that we get those invitations out ahead of time. It's one of the most fun things that you can do. I never did it until I came to Troy because it's not original to the part of India that I am from. And so it's really a lot of fun to be part of that festive activity. Also, October 24th is Diwali. So just giving you a heads up. All right. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Oh, Councilmember Hoderick. Yeah.
As you were talking about I-75, and as you get back, into legislative action, it occurs to me that lame duck season is coming. That happens in Lansing every year, and I tried to pay attention as closely as I can, following news reports and looking at what's coming forward. I can remember a few years back, I know you recall as well, when our tree ordinance would have been put at risk by some legislation that could have been passed. It did not, thankfully. But just generally speaking, when those hours come and those last-minute bills are landing in front of you, and you're seeing something that looks like a local control, please don't hesitate to reach out, and you do. And I guess what I would like our residents to know is that there is often a dialogue between our senator and our rep to say, this bill moving forward would impact us this way. And sometimes we're supportive, sometimes we're not. But I know all of us, I shouldn't speak for all 7 of us, but I know how we all are. Working with my colleagues, we will pay attention with you and our senator, and we're here for you if you need input from us or to reach out to us. Please don't hesitate, because those last-minute bills can be consequential to a neighborhood and a locale, and local control is important.
So one of the bills that is rumored to be making the rounds is the short-term rental bill that I will probably wait to see what the final look of it is. I've shared it with our city attorney, but also with both of you. I've shared it with people in Clawson. That is one of the ones that I'm concerned about. One that did pass the House, in its first avatar, it was House Bill 4095, and I remember coming to Mark Miller and to Attorney Greg Bloom about this. It was a really bad bill about local preemption. Michigan Municipal League, Michigan Township Association, many were against it. I spoke with Senator Bayer, who was on the Senate side, because it affected a specific group home in her district where they wanted to increase going from 4 people in a group home to 10. And this is in a rural area, and they had bought, the organization that was lobbying for this bill had bought 120 acres and wanted to cluster the group homes. And it would have been really hard for the local zoning authority. They didn't want it because they didn't have the support services locally, and they had been very vocal about the bill. And so I had gone to MML and MTA, and I voted against it. Well, they changed it this term. They brought it under a foster care package, and of course everybody wants to take care of foster care kids, and they got the bill through. I voted against it. On principle, I'm really against local preemption, and so know that I do watch if they try to change the bill a little bit and tweak it. Sometimes they're not really changing it for the better, and so while I may not be a lawyer, I understand the importance of local control. So, yeah, I do understand the importance of watching out for what's going to hit us in lame duck, but I think a lot of it will depend on what happens in November. So, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Koupa. That concludes certificates of recognition and special presentations. If you're here from MIVA and want to leave, you can certainly do so now. No need to, I'll give a 30 seconds so it's not too loud all at once, but don't feel obligated like you have to stay. And we'll get those certificates to you, like I said. Next up on the agenda, there's no carryover items, no public hearings. I do see that Isaac Sims had signed up for public comment for items on the agenda. I think that was a mistake because he was here for the invocation. So we have no public comment for items on the agenda from Troy residents. So no need for reply and no postponed items. So we will move on to regular business. First up, I-1, board and committee appointments. There are no mayoral appointments this evening, but we do have 2 city council appointments, and it looks like they were updated on a yellow sheet, late submittal I-1B. So I'll turn it over to Mayor Pro Tem Erickson Galt.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, they were updated. Just to clarify that the nomination from the last meeting, nominating Vinod Mudaliar for the Parks and Recreation Board was for the term that is currently held by Govinder Jan Tatai. So that was the change. And I would move to appoint Pam Brady for the term expiring September 30th, 2025 on the Parks and Recreation Board.
Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Erickson Galt, supported by Councilmember Hoderick, that we approve the appointment of Pam Brady to the Parks and Recreation Board for the term expiring September 30th, 2025. Any discussion? Vote, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain-Crainga?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Erickson Galt?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, also for the Parks and Recreation Board, I would move that the council appoint Vinod Kumar Mudaliar for the term expiring September 30th, 2025, currently held by Govinder Jan Tatai.
Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Erickson Galt, supported by Councilmember Chamberlain-Crainga, that we approve the appointment of Vinod Kumar Mudaliar to the Parks and Recreation Board for the term expiring September 30th, 2025, as printed in the late submittal. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain-Crainga?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Erickson Galt?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes, a motion carries. We thank Ms. Brady and Mr. Mudaliar for their willingness to serve on the Parks and Rec Board. That concludes City Council appointments this evening. I-2 is board and committee nominations. I have one mayoral nomination this evening for the Troy Downtown Development Authority. I'd like to renominate Kathleen Garmo to the Troy DDA for the term expiring September 30th, 2026.
Support.
Moved by the chair, supported by Councilmember Brooks, that we approve the nomination of Kathleen Garmo to the Troy Downtown Development Authority for the term expiring September 30th, 2026. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain-Crainga?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Erickson Galt?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Motion carries. That concludes mayoral nominations this evening. I do not believe there are any city council nominations this evening, so we'll move on to the next. I-3, there's no request for a closed session this evening, so we'll move on to I-4, which is resident budget priority study. And Bob, are you going to do an introduction before Will comes on? All right, so it'll be introduced by Assistant City Manager Bob Bruner.
Thanks, Your Honor. I know City Manager Miller's at home watching, so want to say hi and wish him a speedy recovery. He's recovering from surgery, and I think is already ready to get back in the saddle. But here we are tonight, and I wanted to talk a little bit about why we did a survey. Why are we talking about this before I ask Will to tell you about the results. I attended a session about community engagement recently, and the speaker was a former city manager, and she put some photographs up on the slide, and one of them was a man standing in front of a vending machine. And I was thinking to myself, I wonder what this has to do with community engagement. And she explained that one of the communities she had worked in, this city government had become kind of like a vending machine. Residents would come up to the vending machine, push a button, say, I want this, and the city would give it to them. And it was problematic for a number of reasons. But the reason that I bring it up tonight is that over the course of the last several years in Troy, we've had residents come to the city government vending machine and say, I want more of this, or I want some of that. And City Council and staff have been working together to figure out how to provide more of what people want. And we had an advance last year, which we made some good progress on that. And we've had a series of special meetings where we've been talking about revenues and expenditures and property taxes. And I think we are getting to the point where we've identified that we have new needs. The community wants new needs. And so City Council has to figure out, are we going to reallocate existing resources to meet those needs, or are we going to generate new revenue? And so all of this work that we've been doing in researching and presentations during the special meetings and community engagement now with this survey, these are all inputs into the decision-making process that City Council will eventually make. But that the city government is not, in fact, the vending machine. So the results of the survey are not going to result in City Council necessarily, taking any specific action. But what we're working towards now is the next advance in November, where hopefully City Council will have some discussion and reach some consensus and give staff some direction on what options do you want city staff to look into further, and what options do we take off the table. So I'm really excited to have William St. Amour with us here tonight. This is, I think, the fourth survey we've done with Cobalt in the last couple years. Now, tonight, you'll have the opportunity to ask Will questions if you have any. There's no action tonight, so if you want to make comments, I think do that during the council comment portion of the meeting. But again, all of this is leading up towards that strategic planning meeting in November. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Will.
I will.
Thank you very much. Nice to see everyone this evening. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully it'll keep working. All right, can everyone see the presentation? I'm making it a little larger. All right. So let me go over this. So a number of you are familiar with Cobalt and what we do. We are a 501c3 that works with communities across the country. We're based here in Michigan, working specifically in the areas of research and education and doing a lot of these kinds of studies. Why research matters? This is something that, as Bob mentioned, is important to use community feedback and engagement as one piece of your decision-making process. It doesn't make decisions for you. It just doesn't push a button and make the right kind of soda come out the chute. But it is important to have this kind of statistically based data available so that as you're looking at what are the current needs of the residents, what are their preferences, and then balancing that with the reality of the financial situation and the quality of services that you want to deliver to the city, taking all of those pieces into account. This kind of data is one of the helpful tools that you have as you go through those considerations. So for this study in particular, we wanted to look at multiple budget approaches in terms of ways of dealing with a scenario where there might not be adequate funds to do all of the things that the city would like to do, and also just generally doing a quick check in terms of service levels that residents are experiencing. So this one's a little busy, but this is essentially your executive summary, taking all of the key findings of the study and putting it onto one page. So I'll go over this so that you have it, and then I'll go through in more detail and share with you the information that we found. So first of all, residents really are generally supportive of a small tax or fee increase, particularly to maintain facilities and infrastructure and also public safety kind of things. There are very few that support reducing or eliminating services or programs or facilities. There is a number of folks that are comfortable with a tax increase. The caveat to that is that they want to make sure that city staff do their due diligence. They want to make sure that they're not just writing a check. you've gone through and you've looked carefully at what's the situation with the city, what are the needs of this specific service, are there cuts that can be made that are reasonable, but ultimately residents do want to make sure that services are fully funded and that Troy continues to provide quality services and a quality experience to the residents. When we look at areas of satisfaction, streets and sidewalks were the things that were marked the lowest. And when we looked at funding priorities, streets, sidewalks, and also stormwater drainage were the things that rose to the top. When we look at comments, comments aren't necessarily statistical, but when we have a number of folks repeating the same thing over and over again, we do want to note some of these prominent themes. So a lot of them are along the lines of support for modest increases for specific documented needs. They're not very interested in doing a general tax increase. They do want to make sure that you're looking at existing expenses and trimming off some of the line items that might be appropriate to trim off. They want to make sure that the city continues to be a quality community, providing quality services to the residents. And then in general, as they looked at potential new services, parks, trails, senior services, housing, transportation, those are areas that continue to come up, and they've come up in past surveys too. So let me talk about the methodology. So this was a random sample to 2,000 voters. This was done in August, and we had a very solid response of 393 individuals. To give you a sense of that, to get a national survey to plus or minus 5%, you only need a sample of 385 responses. And so statistically, this is very solid data. Your margin of error is plus or minus 4.9%. In addition to the folks that were part of that sample, we did have it open for other folks in the community that wanted to take the survey. They weren't part of the sample. They weren't mixed in with the sample results. There's a separate line in the crosstab that accounts for them. But there were there were 254 people that took the time to fill out the survey to share their thoughts as well. So your total response really is 647 residents. So you've had a lot of folks that have taken some time to share their ideas and to help you work through these decisions that you're looking at. As with past surveys, we do a lot of crosstabs. This is just a tiny, tiny corner of what the crosstabs have. Essentially, every question in the survey is marched across as a column, and then every demographic group is its own separate row. There's a lot more that aren't showing in terms of demographic rows and questions. But what I wanted to point out is that there's shading involved with this. And if you see something that is consistently shaded, whether it's consistently blue or consistently kind of reddish, what that means is that regardless of demographic group, people really do have similar sorts of preferences, similar sorts of experiences. When you have more differences in terms of a mix of the red and blue, that means that there may be more differences based on some of those demographic groups. In general, higher numbers are a blue shaded number, lower numbers are more of a reddish shaded number. I don't want to say necessarily bad or good, because when you're looking at preferences, it's just guiding your eye. It's not necessarily that it's a good option or a bad option. All right, let's dive into the results specifically. So looking at the general approach to addressing some of the funding limitations. And so you have a Pareto chart. This percentage is representing the percentage of respondents that said they would support or prefer this particular approach if funds aren't available to cover all of the costs of existing services. So maintaining city facilities and infrastructure to prevent deterioration with a small tax or fee increase. You can see that there's about 52% of the residents said that yes, they do support that. When we look at maintaining local programs and services with a small tax and fee, you can see again, you're brushing up against that 50% mark. Improving facilities and infrastructure with a small tax increase, you can see a bit softer, more around 44%, 43%, but then you can see it dropping off. So when we look down here at the end in terms of the things that folks support the least, so over here on the right-hand side, we see closing existing facilities to keep the taxes and fees at the same level. That only had about a 10% increase. Same thing as far as delaying facility and infrastructure maintenance and eliminating local programs and services. So those are not what people would like to see. They are willing to pay a little bit more to maintain or even slightly improve some of the things. Again, they want to see the specifics in terms of these. So diving into programs and services offered by the city, We asked them what kind of specific approach would they support if funding is not available to continue current funding levels. And so they essentially had a number of options: eliminate the service, reduce service levels, increase taxes, increase fees, or share with another community. You can see the color coding based on what kind of service it is. When we look at the increased taxes, you can see there are a couple of areas that are over 50%, and that's fire services and police services. When we look at increased fees, we can see the largest there on the recreational programs. Again, eliminating the service, very little support, reducing service levels, a little bit more support for the recreational programs and the senior programming and the park maintenance, but still well below the 30%. Then we wanted to get a little bit more specific in terms of looking at potential tax proposals. So where would they support a tax increase to fund these different services? And here, again, you can see the breakdown. Police and fire, both over 50%, ambulance closer to 40%. The difference between this chart and the prior chart here is that here they have the option of saying that they need more information. And so we're often seeing, these blue bars in terms of tax support being a bit softer because, again, we see in the comments that folks do want a little bit more information about what it is that you'd like to do. When we look at the orange in terms of outright opposition on these three areas, not too much. We can see that tax increase for recreational and senior programs and even park maintenance, that there's a larger percentage of folks saying, I'm not comfortable with that compared to those who are. For those that are supportive of a tax increase, we asked how much per month would they be willing to pay. And you can see that there's about 20% that said, no, I don't support any additional funding. I wouldn't want to pay anything. But then you can see these blue bars, if we stack them up into some level of increase, you have about 72% of the folks saying that they'd be willing to pay something. The plurality of them, $5 to $10 per month. So we then had an open-ended question asking them what they would like the city to know about how they prioritize the information, how they responded the way they did. So this word cloud, the things that came up most often in the comments are the largest words, and then we looked at the themes around those. So the word service right there in the middle, people really talked about prioritizing the core services, the police, the fire, the ambulance, those kinds of things. There were a number of service comments about increasing the fees for those services that are more fee-based, that weren't necessarily used by all residents, things like recreational services. And then they also mentioned that, again, funding services is really important to have a high quality city. The word tax, no surprise that came up a lot in this particular survey. The comments were around supporting a modest tax or fee increase. They think it's probably appropriate. They see the prices coming up. They know the cost of doing business has gone up. Do they want to pay more? Well, not especially, but they understand that may be needed. They do want to make sure that there's some sensitivity about residents that are being particularly impacted by inflation, particularly those on fixed incomes. So those kinds of comments came up quite a bit. And there were also a number of questions regarding the revenue that's coming in from new developments around the city. So they know that that's generating tax. They want to have a better understanding of how that affects the overall tax picture that the city is dealing with. When we look at programs, again, similar to services, they understand that programs need to be adequately funded. There's probably some waste in there, so they do want to make sure that you do take a look at some of those things that aren't well utilized, may not be providing the kind of value that they could. But in general, they understand they need to be funded. So let's now dive into facilities and infrastructure. Looking at satisfaction with core facility and infrastructure, we can see on a scale of 1 to 10, pretty good scores, particularly strong scores with fire stations, with the police department building, and with the police and fire training center. A bit softer with sidewalks, stormwater, and streets. So we saw that echoed in some of the earlier questions. When we look at some of the quality of life kinds of amenities going on in the community, again, same scale. When we're looking at things that were marked particularly high, we have the Nature Center, we have the Troy Community Center, we have the Historical Village and the library. Things that were a little bit softer, mainly was the undeveloped city parks that received the lower score. So then we asked a question for all of these same things that we just looked at from a satisfaction standpoint to ask, which of these should be prioritized from a budgetary standpoint? And this is showing the percentage of residents that picked these areas as their top choices. And so they were able to pick up to 6. So, if you add these up, it'll be more than 100%. But when you look at that, you can see streets, stormwater, and sidewalks, all over 50% in terms of the prioritization. You can see fire station and Troy Public Library and Troy Police Department building all kind of coming in that 40% range as well. When we dive over to the far side, we can see the 2 golf courses, Troy Transit Center, Historic Village, and District Court building, all having much more limited support in terms of prioritization. So it wouldn't be a report from me if I didn't have bubble charts, and I know that you all love them. So what this is doing is it's basically taking those 2 dimensions, satisfaction on the vertical and priority on the bottom, on the horizontal. So it's essentially telling you, what are the things that people are most satisfied with? Those are the bubbles that tend to be the higher bubbles. And what are the things that are the highest priority? And those are the things that are over here on the far right side. And so you can see things like city or the fire stations, the police department building at number 19, which is Troy Public Library. These are all things that are important from a prioritization standpoint, and they're pretty happy with them too. But when we go down here and we look at this bottom right corner, we can see 7, 8, and 9 being high priority, but lower satisfaction areas. And these are the sidewalks, the stormwater drainage, flood control, and the streets. We then wanted to look at these different areas and, again, looking at different kind of options. If there aren't enough funding, how do people want to respond? So their options were closing the facility, increasing fees, increases taxes, or sharing the services with other communities. So when we look at the increased taxes category, there were 3 areas that were over 50%: fire stations, police department building, streets. And then when we looked at increased fees, there were 2 areas that crossed that 50% line. That's Troy Community Center and Troy Aquatic Center. Again, very few closing the services, closing the facility, not a lot of support for sharing with another community either. So looking at that tax aspect again, and again asking them if they support or oppose, we see again streets, fire stations, police department, all things that have pretty strong support, very limited opposition, and you can see that opposition increasing for some of these other areas off to the right, as far as a tax to support Historic Village, the Aquatic Center, Nature Center, and so on. A lot of fairly significant gray lines as far as needing more information. Again, tying in with the comments that folks, they do want to understand the thinking, they do want to understand what's going on with these programs, and why you're making the recommendations for a tax increase. They're not opposed, they just want to make sure that they see the due diligence. When we look at the level of tax support, very similar to the last chart, so about 18% say, no, I don't support any additional funding. We have about 73% saying that they do support some level of increase. And then you can see the breakdown by the dollars per month in terms of how much of an increase they'd be willing to pay. Again, diving into the word cloud, the big themes that we saw is the word increase. So again, some increases expected with the costs. They want to make sure that the budget is being reviewed to minimize waste. And again, tying in fees for services where that's appropriate. The word need, these are themes that we heard in the other one, that we need to ensure there's funding in place to maintain the core services, and really looking closely to see if something is really needed or not, and looking at needs versus wants. From a facility standpoint, thinking about user fees and really trying to make sure that the folks that are using some of these facilities are paying a larger share of covering the cost of these facilities. We did want to ask them if there were additional programs or services or amenities that they wanted to see, or if they've seen in another community that they would like to have brought into Troy. And so there were three that particularly rose, a number of things around parks. So really expanding parks. Rochester Hills came up a couple of times in these comments, but looking at expanding parks, continuing to work on parks, continuing to work on green space kinds of issues. The word senior came up quite a bit. So senior center, making sure that the sidewalks and trails are safe for seniors in terms of trying to reduce barriers, lighting, some of those kinds of issues. And then ultimately making sure that there's more senior services and housing and transportation and kind of those types of services available for that particular cohort. The word trail, we've seen trails coming across pretty much all of the surveys that we've been working on with you. So they would like to see all of the trails connected. They would like to see a loop through some sort of downtown area. They would like to see a loop around the perimeter of parks. They also talked about maybe putting together some sort of community volunteer group to help with some of these efforts for maintaining the trails, potentially for trail marking, helping with maps, those kinds of things as well. So in general, we asked them what kind of tax approach would they be the most supportive of in terms of how would they like to have it structured. So their options were a dedicated millage proposal for specific services, and you can see that's the one that received the most support. A bond proposal, a general tax proposal. People just generally are not supportive of any kind of increase or no preference. So again, folks are more interested in seeing a specific tax for a specific purpose rather than something that's more general. And then one last opportunity for them to share some of the comments. So the word increase. So again, they wanted to make sure that the city was looking at the line items before there's an increase. They want to make sure that there's that due diligence taking place. They also wanted to make sure that some of those services that are appropriate to be funded through fees are looked at and funded more through the fees as well. So same thing with the word tax. And the word need, again, just providing information on how funding is going to be spent, why the need is there, making sure that you're separating needs and wants so that you are focusing really on those things that you need to do and tying in the funding to the particular objective that you're trying to achieve. So that takes us to the end. Questions?
Thanks, Will. Do we get to see your face again, or are we going to look at your shared screen? I guess it doesn't matter
If you
so
prefer
much.
my face, then you can see my face.
There we go. All right. Well, I appreciate the thorough report, the additional information given to us that you didn't share as part of the presentation this evening. Obviously, those crosstabs and some of the open-ended questions and comments are illuminating. Now's an opportunity for council to ask questions. There's not an action item on the agenda, which means this is not just a general discussion. I think we're best, well, our rules provide that we can ask questions of the presentation, but they're not there for us to just kind of speak about our feelings on a lot of these issues. We can do that in council comments, as Bob had mentioned, or certainly my understanding is that there will be ample opportunity to discuss these things at our advance in 6 weeks, which is kind of the purpose. So questions specific to the presentation from Will, I think are what's on the table right now. Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for this presentation again, as always. Very interesting data. I saw the three big items were streets, stormwater, and sidewalks. Can you add any more detail to maybe in the detailed comments on what residents' thoughts on that are? I mean, streets, obviously, roads in the whole state have issues. We've improved a lot in the last few years, but I'm curious, are there any more general themes of how they felt about that? Because those were very prominent in those graphs that, bam, streets, stormwater, and sidewalks, especially the stormwater I found interesting. I understand in the last few years with the flooding, but can you elaborate any more on what people were saying about those?
I can't go into too much detail just off the cuff, but in the comments, I remember there were a lot of comments that were specific to those areas. So information on specific streets that people were concerned about, particular intersections. So there are more details available.
Any other questions, David?
That's all, yeah.
Councilmember Chamberlain Krenga for a question.
Thank you, Mayor. And William, great to see you again. Thank you as always
Good to see you,
for
too.
these very helpful presentations.
My pleasure.
So 2 questions. The first is, did you collect demographic data around social identification like race, ethnicity? I believe we've done that in the past. Forgive me if I missed it. Just wanted to ask.
In the crosstabs, there's a breakdown of the demographic questions. So what we asked specifically in this survey, we did use a lighter collection set of demographics that we collected this time compared to other surveys, but we collected years of residency, age, household composition in terms of do they have young children or dependent parents. We asked about employment, education level, zip code, if they own or rent, household income, and then whether they were in the sample or not. So we did not collect the race questions. We did not collect gender. It is possible for us to go back from the voter records and potentially patch that in if that's something that's important. But for this particular survey, we wanted to keep it a little bit shorter, so we had a better response.
Okay, thank you, William, for that explanation.
You're welcome.
So the meatier question I have that I'm trying to work through is on page 24, really parks and trails, again, rise to the top. We've seen that throughout our surveys, and William, you know our surveys quite well. And so that's not a surprise that people said that. But what was a surprise in some of the other areas, I didn't see it rise to the top. For example, on page 19, where I like how you map out satisfaction vis-a-vis priority for residents. And they're at the top. And throughout the survey, to me, the big takeaway was around public safety, which again, is not new. It's what we've heard in our prior surveys. Public safety, roads, those are very important. But if I look at those top 3 that have high satisfaction, high priority among residents, that's fire stations, police department buildings, and was it 19 is Troy Public Library. So trails, I think, was at 11 or 15. Just trying to ask how to understand that, William, in the sense that on page 24, when people talk about new services, yes, they want to see connected trails and continue to invest in our parks. But when they're asked about prioritizing, that's where really public safety comes to the fore. And here we see our library, we see streets and drainage. So just wonder if you have some thoughts on that.
Absolutely. So 2 pieces. One is there are different styles of questions. So an open-ended question compared to something that's just has a closed set of options. So that's one difference. Also, it's kind of the difference between wants and needs. There's things that they would like to have, but they aren't necessarily core needs. And what we often see, particularly as we're potentially going into a time with more constrained revenue, is kind of a Maslow hierarchy of needs. So if you look at the base of the pyramid in terms of what those needs are, they're things that are oriented around security. And then once security needs are taken care of, then people go up a little higher, and then they're looking at more quality of life kind of things than on up the pyramid. So what I think you're seeing is really that playing out. That there are certain core services like public safety that they want to make sure is rock solid, that foundation is solid. Core needs that they want to make sure are met, like good transportation network, that the roads aren't going to tear up their vehicles, those kinds of things. And then once all of those kind of gotta-haves are done, then we start moving into things that are more nice-to-haves, which would be like the parks and the trails and those kinds of things. They'd love to have them, but in a situation where the finances are more constrained, I think what you're seeing that from this chart, statistically on page 19, I'm looking at it. You can't see it as I'm waving my hand around the screen, but I think this is just showing that your residents really are pretty reasonable in terms of how they're approaching things, and they want to put first things first, and then if you go beyond that, doing your due diligence.
Exactly, William. That's helpful. That was exactly kind of what I was thinking, the needs versus wants. So thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good questions. Additional questions from council. Councilmember Abraham.
Thank you, Mayor. Will, great reading as always. I also have a question about the demographics of the responders. The respondents, 44% were 65% or older. My question is how do the percentage breakdowns relative to age correspond to voter turnout here in Troy? Is there a similar correlation, or might the results of this survey skew a little bit heavier towards maybe the more senior population in Troy?
I might have to reach out to Bob because I know he's looked at this more closely and I don't know the voter pattern for Troy. But generally, what we see with communities is that older residents tend to vote more often and older residents tend to respond to surveys more often. So there is a correlation between those two things. Does it perfectly mirror your demographics overall? No, because there is that older skew in both voters and in terms of your residents. But one thing that I do want to point out is that color coding that we have inside the crosstabs, when you start going through all of those, what you'll see quite often is that there is very little difference by age cohort for a number of these different things. Or if you do see a difference, it might just be in like the 18 to 24-year-olds that are a different pattern than others folks. And because we have these crosstabs, you can see, you know, you've got this variation in the population when it's applicable, as opposed to just having, even if we were perfectly reflecting the demographics, those groups might be washed out just because they're a smaller percentage of your population. So really those crosstabs become very useful from an operational standpoint because you can see, is it pretty consistent regarding demographics, or are there some variations based on age or some other characteristic that you want to pay attention to, like do they have kids in the home or are they self-employed or whatever?
Appreciate that. Thank you, Will.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Councilmember Abraham. Additional questions? All right, well, thank you. Appreciate you popping in this evening and for providing us with lots of good material as always. And we'll, I'm sure you'll hear from us again. Thank you.
It's always a pleasure. Have a great evening.
Thank you. You too. Like I said, there's no action item on this agenda, so if we want to discuss it a little further, we certainly can in council comments, or we can save it for the advance when it's more on the table. I-4, that was I-4. I-5 is a budget amendment, landscape redesign in the Troy Downtown Development Authority District. Detailed design, this will be introduced by Kurt Bovenseep, our Public Works Director.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Kind of unique. I know I've been before you on this before. So the DDA is the actual holder of the contract with OHM. However, this council does approve the DDA's budget. So the DDA needs additional funds to continue on with the landscaping effort, the re-landscaping effort along the Big Beaver corridor. So the request tonight is to basically reappropriate those funds to the Parks Fund that holds the DDA account. But I would also like to take this opportunity to kind of update council on where we're at in the progress of the DDA landscaping efforts. So I can get that presentation to come up.
Kurt, I'm going to start with a question.
Certainly.
These are DDA funds. We're not transferring any city funds into a DDA. We're just making sure they're properly allocated for DDA use of their own funds, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you for the intro to this slide. So
there you go.
this is a condensed version of what the DDA board saw last week and what the steering committee's been working on for over the last several months. So as you can see on the bottom line there shows the fund balance of the DDA this year and then out to 2025. So the DDA does have sufficient funds currently to transfer that requested $300,000 to be able to continue on with the design development of the re-landscaping. And as you'll see further in the presentation that the efforts to re-landscape does match the revenue collected through the DDA TIF. So we're not requesting to spend and re-landscape the entire DDA all at once. So just a reminder, if you're not familiar, the boundaries of the DDA, they extend approximately a half a mile west of Coolidge to Rochester Road, and then it does go north and south in those particular zones. We always start with our guiding principles, even when we meet as a steering committee. It's a good reminder of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve, and just hear a couple things that keep us organized and on track in our efforts. I think, as we talked with some of our constituents throughout the corridor and some of our stakeholders, safety was probably the number one, but they also wanted something that was very high impact, not necessarily something that says, in writing, welcome to the Troy Big Beaver corridor, but more of a look and feel that you know it when you're there and you know what it was like when you leave. And this effort isn't just done in a vacuum. We have a lot of previous studies that we've looked at and we've incorporated into this design effort. Just a reminder, these are what we call the major stakeholders in the corridor that we sat down and discussed with each of them what they would like to see and what they would like to see in this process and the outcome of the process. Ultimately, we came with a theme of consistency through nature. What does that mean? It means taking a very close look at the Michigan landscape and trying to re-landscape the Big Beaver corridor, not to mimic it, but to similar to design with native species, using as much natural elements as we can, but having that consistency that we want to see throughout the corridor. Because if you remember, the corridor right now is really bisected by I-75 with two different unique landscape designs. So we want that consistency. Here's are some of our inspirational images that we use as we worked through the design. Again, you see a lot of the natural elements and the consistency and the placement of those elements. A lot of natural features, rocks, native species, as I mentioned, and lots of color, trying to incorporate as much color as we can into the landscape and all times of year. So 4 seasons out of the year have some sort of different color throughout the entire corridor. Through our stakeholder engagement, there was a lot of discussion on pedestrian comfort. That was a surprise to me. I didn't realize that there was such a big interest from our major stakeholders in making sure that this environment is comfortable for pedestrians. But we're taking a real close look on how we can make this re-landscaping effort address some of these pedestrian issues. So we really divided the corridor up into several different areas, and we looked at each one individually since we've been working on this since February, March. So as we looked at the first kind of section, we looked at the diverging diamond, which is in the center there. Great opportunity there with MDOT coming in and redoing that gives us a kind of a clean palette, if you will. And we wanted to make sure that this is the entrance to the corridor, and that's unique. So a lot of times your entrance at either end of a corridor, where Troy's corridor is a little unique where you enter in the middle. So that creates a great opportunity to welcome people and make sure that there isn't a division between the east and west side, so it's welcoming on both sides and there's some consistency. So here's a rendering of many, many months and a lot of discussion that we came up with. You see that consistency, that consistent theme. It's welcoming. It actually enhances the experience moving through the DDI, because if you traveled through it, it can be a little confusing. So using the landscape actually to help people navigate through the DDI. This is an image as if you were exiting off of the diverging diamond off of I-75. This is what you would see again, that chevron type feel, that stone facade helps direct traffic, gives a visual reference of where you're at or where you're going. You can see a lot of different color. We're not proposing any annual plants here. This is all perennials. A lot of use of hardscape you can see, again with that kind of vertical wall, if you will. That vertical element uses hardscape, so it's less to maintain, taking all that into consideration. So this would be a view of if you were traveling eastbound. You can see off in the distance that is the Columbia Center off. It kind of, the landscape frames are more prominent buildings in the corridor. Enhances the pedestrian experience, and you see how everything kind of connects. It has a flow to it, even crossing the sidewalk. On one side of the sidewalk, it's the same landscape on the other side, so it has a nice flow, because as a pedestrian, you may not see that flow, but as you're driving past it, it becomes almost like a corridor where you get that sense of direction and sense of flow of the landscape. A lot of curvatures, a lot of different heights of the landscape being used throughout the design. Underlighting, a lot of discussion on the elements underneath the I-75 overpass, and it was determined that your attention driving through that diverging diamond is not necessarily on what's underneath. You're trying just to stay in your lane and making sure no one else comes over into your lane. So we didn't want to create a distraction, and we just certainly didn't want to spend a lot of time that wasn't going to be enjoyed. So just some simple underlighting, accentuating the columns and the brickwork on the overpass. Dave, if we could just go to the DDI fly-through. OHM put together a short video of what it would be like to actually drive through the landscape. Pretty drastic change from what's out there right now. So that was the diverging diamond intersection. That was one area that we specifically concentrated on. And as we move through the presentation, we'll go to the median landscaping now, where we concentrated on the median landscape. Now remember, this is conceptual design, so we didn't design something specific for a specific location. This is intended to give you the idea of the theme, and then it would be specifically designed for each section of the median. I lost the clickability. Oh. Go back one more, please. Ahead one, please. Thank you. So this is a kind of a bird's eye view of what the median landscape, again, you can see the undulating landscape. You have different heights of the landscape. You have a vertical wall element. You have that curvature that kind of flows, river bed, if you will, kind of feel throughout the entire corridor. Next slide, please. We did have some preliminary discussions with the Road Commission for Oakland County, as Big Beaver is their road, and generally they're very comfortable with the landscaping, the design, so we've kind of head that off as well. Next slide. Although this is a little deceiving, that stone element looks slightly vertical than what it actually is. It is less than a 5% slope, which the Road Commission is comfortable with, so we're not creating any launching pads out there for vehicles if they were to leave the roadway. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. So then we took a look at specifically the entrance or the gateways to the corridor. We concentrated our efforts over the one at Coolidge. That one's a little more unique than Rochester Road. Rochester Road has a pretty dense landscape now, and we thought everyone in the steering committee liked that design, so we kind of emulated it through the design over on the west side. And also, the west side has another unique opportunity that it abuts a very populated residential neighborhood. And we thought there was an opportunity to create maybe almost a linear park as pedestrians could enter the landscape. Next slide, please. So here you see that element again, of that chevron element in the median, kind of directs your attention to where you're going to go, stay on the right side of the road. Undulating landscape. Next slide. That wall element over on the right side. OHM did a great job of placing some of the existing buildings in there so you can get a look and feel of what it might look like. Next slide. Next slide. So here's the pedestrian walkway I was talking about. There's extremely wide right-of-way right here. There is an existing 5-foot walk that stops and starts to an 8-foot walk, so we thought this might be a good opportunity to make it all an 8-foot walk and make it more of a pedestrian user-friendly experience entering the corridor. Thank you, Dave. Next slide. Then as we concentrated on the major intersections, again, the concept, even though we're going to show the intersection of Coolidge and Big Beaver, this can be extended throughout every intersection, Crooks, Livernois, and Rochester. Next slide. It's the plan view. If you're familiar with the intersection of Rochester and Big Beaver, very similar design, and you have some lower landscape in the middle of the intersection, and then it grows taller as you move out. Some seating elements in here, and some more pedestrian scaled landscape than the other areas of the corridor. Next slide. It might be working now. Okay, thank you. So again, that seating element, we spent a lot of discussion on that. What does that look like? And that's actually stone-faced seat with a wood top. So just, again, that natural environment, that consistency through nature. See that seating element here, lower landscape towards the intersection to not impede visibility with traffic and pedestrians. We also talked about pedestrian safety and the need for additional mid-block crossings. We thought a design that was more of an experience than just a crossing. So we concentrated on making that experience as best we could, recognizing though that we don't want to make it a park in the middle of Big Beaver because probably no one's going to sit there and really enjoy it. But there could be an opportunity if someone needed to sit to take a rest. A lot of natural elements here using stamped concrete in the mid-block crossings, stone features, go back here, some stone features, again, not just your typical straight across, more of a Z pattern, and giving some more of an experience of walking through it, making it more comfortable for people. It has to be inviting. People want to have to be able to use the mid-block crossings, or they're going to continue just to cross wherever they want in a very unsafe manner. So a lot of efforts went into this to make it as inviting as possible. We started discussions. I don't know if you're aware, the city does own the parcel on the southwest corner of Big Beaver and Livernois, outlined in the black next to the DTE substation. Has a lot of potential. We just started really discussing what it could be, whether it's a small pocket park or a corner park or something used. We feel that it's in a good location. It is almost in the middle of the corridor. It could highlight something. However, DTE is going through a process to re-landscape the substation, so we're working closely with them to make sure that their efforts don't conflict with ours and our efforts don't conflict with theirs. So conceptually, it's a very large project and is designed to be done over several years. And you can see each section with a total working project of $18.6 million for the entire project. Recognizing that we don't have, the DDA does not have that type of funding right out of the gate, and quite frankly, we wouldn't want to institute a re-landscaping project of this size because there are quite a few trees out there that still have some life left in them. We still program out there with the holiday lights that we want something to be able to substitute that before we just stop doing it. So the effort is to phase this out over the next several years, so it's not a big shock. So we have mature trees, we have some smaller trees, so it all works very well. So the first section that the committee and the DDA agrees that should be concentrated on is the diverging diamond. That is the welcoming center to the corridor. That is the area of the corridor that needs the most amount of attention. So that is the area that they're proposing to concentrate on over the next year through design and then construction. So here's some cost estimates. Again, this is cost estimates, conceptual design. There is quite a few contingencies in there, and there is also inflationary factors in there because it is such a long-spanned project. So schedule-wise, seems I'm saying this a lot, but this is a very aggressive schedule, but it does meet the funding for the DDA. Assuming council does approve the reappropriation of funds to the DDA tonight, it would go in front of the DDA later this month to approve the contract with OHM. They would then start the design of the diverging diamond intersection, and that would likely go out to bid for construction late next winter, early spring. So construction would start right around, by the time everything got set, permitting and everything, construction would start around July of 2023. Available funding, so the DDI project is almost $5 million. The available funding is that $5 million. We have $2.5 million available in 2020, would be fiscal year 2024, and then another $2.5 million in 2025 fiscal year. That works well. Again, the DDI is a very large project. It's going to take some significant infrastructure. It's going to take some significant planting. So the funding works out well. So we would start construction depending on the design, whether it would be a specific section of the DDI or it might be all the hardscape. It could be all the softscape. That's yet to be decided. But that'll all be determined in the design process. Once the DDI is designed and bid, they'll then move on to the design of the rest of the corridor, and that again will be phased out over until really the life of the DDA, which expires in 2034. I know that was a lot. I feel like I was the credits to the movie. You've sat through a lot of presentations, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if there is.
Thanks, Kurt. I'm going to take it back. We saw a lot of stuff. We're not approving anything. We're not being asked to approve anything other than tonight, which is I-5, just reallocating the DDA's own money of $300,000 into the fund that they can then use to approve the contract for continued design work.
Correct.
Correct? So with that in mind, no one's going to ask Kurt about what kind of tree is going to go at Rochester Road and Big Beaver. That's not what this is about. Some of those decisions haven't been made yet. But I'm sure he'll answer any questions we ask him because he's a good sport. But let's try to realize this isn't a study session about DDA landscaping in as much as we appreciate the update and those drawings, but it is about the budget amendment itself specifically. So that said, now that I've threatened all of you, any questions? Please ask. I am only half kidding. No. So, go ahead, Councilmember Chamberlain-Cranko.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a very easy question, because you actually answered all of my questions I had, so thank you for that well-done presentation. Could we get a copy of this? I presume maybe it's in the minutes of the DDA, but that was my only question.
Certainly, yeah. I will make the copy, the full presentation that was given to the DDA available.
I'm going to just say, I've seen a version of this presentation 3 times in the past 10 days. First time by Kurt, though, so that was exciting. So thank you. It's, even though I told everybody not to talk about the design, I'm going to for a quick second. You know, the steering committee's worked consistently and met regularly every 2 or 3 weeks for the past several months now. Alan Kirillik, the chair of the DDA, has been so active in this project and the design aspect of it. I mean, to the point of, I can't tell you how many meetings he stood up, walked over to the screen and pointed stuff and moved stuff around. And he's often somebody that, you know, when it's related to the Big Beaver corridor or the DDA, I look to Alan for his guidance and his wisdom, frankly, with his long-term history, especially with the DDA itself. And I talked to him this morning, and he's, first of all, he's happy to answer questions from anybody specifically for him if you reach out to him. But he really is loving the direction this is going and is very supportive of this project and where we're at. So if that helps in any way, just to know that it's not just Kurt's presentation, it's not just OHM, it's been a huge steering committee and Alan's been very, very involved.
Mayor, if I may, maybe I neglected to say, this was presented to the DDA last Monday, and we received very minimal negative comments. Everyone was relatively positive about the project. That was their first opportunity to actually see it before they'll approve the concept their next meeting. So the DDA, I think it's October 24th, will actually, along with approving the continuation of OHM, will approve the concept and the theme of consistency through nature in October 24th.
Someone like to move the resolution? Then we can discuss more. Councilmember Hoderick?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move I-5 budget amendment, landscape redesign in the Troy Downtown Development Authority District, detailed design, as printed in the agenda packet.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember Hoderick, supported by Councilmember Chamberlain-Craig, that we approve I-5 Budget Amendment Landscape Redesign in the Troy Downtown Development Authority District Detailed Design as printed in the agenda packet. Any discussion? Councilmember Chamberlain-Craig.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick comment. I will get to the budget amendment, but just to say, I did want to say hats off to the steering committee, all the work that you've done, the terrific, and that's you, Mayor, you're on that steering committee, all the terrific public engagement that's been done with those stakeholders. I just think that is the best of Troy. We were recently at the event, Mayor, that we hosted, the
SOCMA.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the projects I was asked by city manager, what are you excited about in Troy? And along with the skating park, I shared this project. I'm really excited about this, and all the more just seeing it. And I love how safety is a part of it. I love, this gets to the actual budget amendment. I love that we're working with OHM advisors because they're working on our trails and pathways. They're working on the skating pavilion. They worked on the Gene Stein redesign. So that helps to create a really special continuity that we're trying to go for and enlivening this, you could see it as a concrete corridor, but we're now going to make it this, bring this beautiful, in a sense, I don't want to say green space, but you're bringing a lot of green to it. And a lot of, not just green, but reds and lavenders and beautiful colors. And I think that helps to working with OHM, and they're working in all these other green spaces to create a really special continuity. So I'm proud to support that.
Thank you, Councilmember Chamberlain-Craig. To that point, briefly, quickly, as we keep going, even though I said we weren't, I know that there's concepts in this that have been carried over to the pavilion project, and there is that continuity, and that is the idea, is that we can then replicate portions of this in other parts of the city where necessary, because we recognize, obviously, these are DDA funds, and this is the DDA, and it's a very specific place, but that continuity throughout the city, it's important that we have good-looking hardscape and softscape in other major intersections, other major roads. So I'm very comfortable with the concept of using this as a model and things we can filter out into other parts of the city as well, if I may. So, all right, any other discussion? All right, vote Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Chamberlain-Craig.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Erickson Galt.
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick.
Yes.
Mayor Baker.
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham.
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks.
Yes.
Motion carries. That concludes regular business this evening. Next up is the consent agenda. Looks like we have two late submittals for J02A and J03A. Would anyone like to pull anything from the consent agenda for future discussion and contemplation? Councilmember Abraham?
I'd like to move all items on the consent agenda as printed and as amended for late submittals J2A and J3A.
Support.
Moved by Councilmember Abraham, supported by Councilmember Hamilton, that we approve all items on the consent agenda, including the late submittal items as read into the record and printed in the agenda packet. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Pro Tem Erickson Galt.
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick.
Yes.
Mayor Baker.
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham.
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks.
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain-Craig.
Yes.
Motion carries. If you're here for a consent agenda item this evening, they've all been approved. There are no memorandums and future council agenda items this evening. There is no one signed up for public comment for items not on the agenda from Troy residents and businesses, so there's no need for reply. We have no council referrals this evening, so we'll move on to reports. Does anybody have any comments on any of the reports this evening? Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you. I was looking at O2C, the election update from Clerk Dixon. There's a lot of great information in this report. I know we have an upcoming election in a few weeks. Absentee ballots are being mailed out today, I think, were mailed out. And so there's a lot of different voter outreach efforts that Clerk Dixon is undergoing. I'd like to ask her if she could summarize that. And she had some updates on some legislation that may allow some early pre-processing of absentee ballots for a few days, which is interesting.
City Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor.
If it's okay with the acting city manager today, yes.
I'm assuming. So yeah, this report, it gets into the weeds a little bit, but I don't think anybody minds because there is a lot of numbers thrown around about where we were before 2018 and where we are now. Some of that is because of the pandemic and some of it is because of the constitutional amendment that was on the November 2018 ballot. We have new legislation that was just passed. As far as I know right now, it hasn't been signed yet, but it's expected to be signed. And that would give us an extra day to process, or extra 2 days to process the to pre-process the absentee ballots, similar to what we were allowed to do in November of 2020, where we had an extra day, but this would have no sunset to it. So it would be, we would be allowed to continue to have Sunday and Monday available to us to pre-process, which is up to the point of taking the, we wouldn't be allowed to take the ballot stub off or remove the ballot from the secrecy sleeve, but the activity of slicing the envelope open and removing that from the envelope will save a lot of time and make it so that our election workers will probably not have to work until 11 o'clock the next day after the election, which is what I was worried about. Because as Councilmember Hamilton pointed out, ballots started being mailed today, and we mailed 16,000 ballots today. I'm expecting that number to go up to closer to 25,000 by the time Election Day comes, because we're getting applications every day from people. Basically, the ballots that went out today are people that voted in the August election, and then a few extras. So all the people that want to vote in November absentee are getting their applications to us now. So that extra time of Sunday and Monday, it can be a combination of both days, or it could be one or the other day. And we're making our plans right now to hire people so that we'll be able to take advantage of that. There's a couple other things in the legislation. Pretty much we do all of that already. There's just some minor, as far as my opinion is, it's minor changes that we would have to make. A log for the box over at the community center when we empty it, which is not a big deal. And instead of using a mail tub or something like that to empty the boxes downstairs, we would have to use a ballot bag. So we already have all that equipment. We don't even have to buy anything to comply with the law. So we're totally fine with that. And then as far as the dates go, there's a lot of dates that I listed in the report. There's some speaking engagements that are open to the public coming up. There's also dates for the public accuracy test, for the last day to register to vote by any other means besides in person. That's coming up at the end of October. Absentee ballots are due by 8 o'clock on Election Day. Election Day, of course, is November 8th. Polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And I just encourage everyone to read this report because I tried to put as much in it as I could think of with all the questions that I've been asked over the past few weeks and the topics that I felt were, on people's minds all the time regarding the election. So, of course, if anybody has any other questions, I'm always available to answer them. Or if you see the need for a report on something specific, I'm more than willing to offer that too.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. Anything else, Councilmember Hamilton?
Yeah, and I noticed there's the drive-through clerk. I know those have always worked great. I think that's, what are the dates on that? Somewhere in here.
We have a couple different voter events coming up. Let me just open that again. The drive-through clerk's office is a super popular event that we started in 2020. We just continued it regardless of whether the building's open or not. That drive-through event is on October 29th between 8 a.m. and 1 p.m. at the east doors of City Hall. The other additional times that the clerk's office is open, which is Wednesday, October 26th until 7 p.m., and then Saturday, November 5th, from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Those office hours are at the clerk's counter. So the only drive-through event would be the Saturday, October 29th from 8 to 1 at the east doors.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, City Clerk. I wish other communities had the, one, I wish they had a report that was this thorough, because I think it would do a lot in our state and country. But I know that you've worked very hard with your team to stay on top of these issues and to try to, I don't know how to say it without sticking my foot in my mouth, because election stuff is such a hot button issue, but I'm very proud of what the city of Troy does for election integrity, for voter outreach, for making sure that we're following and going above and beyond what is expected by our residents. And I do hear from a lot of residents of varying political persuasions, and I'm very thankful that I hear good things about our city of Troy clerk's office, unlike a lot of other communities, is I guess what I'm trying to say. So I give you a lot of credit for that. I thank you for that.
Thank you, and I say it all the time. I'm the person up here doing the talking, but I have a whole team of people in my office that are doing the work, and they're behind all of our activities 100%. Even though I'm the one telling you about them, a lot of those ideas come from the staff, and we just carry them out. So thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments on reports, Councilmember Abraham.
Just wanted to follow up on something Ms. Dixon said. You mentioned that you're hiring or would be hiring to support the 2 extra days. If someone is interested in working on the election, whether it's that Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday, where can they go for more information? Because as I understand it, you can never have too many volunteers, and there's no better way to learn about how an election runs than to actually participate in it.
That is true. I say that a lot too, is the best way to learn about what goes on Election Day is to work on Election Day. So if you have any doubts about how things are handled, the best way to relieve those doubts would be to get behind the scenes and help out and go through the training. So we did, a few years ago, we started offering all of our training materials are on the city website. It's troymi.gov/election workers. And we hear all the time from different municipalities and from people from different municipalities who are borrowing our training materials so that they can learn about what goes on behind the scenes on Election Day. But anyone who is interested in working can contact the city clerk's office at 248-524-3316 or stop by the clerk's office. There's an application. As soon as you fill the application out, you'll be on the list, and then you'll be notified of the training. We have multiple training opportunities before every election. And then if you want to just peruse the training materials and see what you'd be getting yourself into, you can go to the election workers webpage and check everything out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Abraham. Additional comments on reports? Councilmember Hoderick.
Just generally, it's always worth taking time to look at the department reports that are in our agenda packet. And often there's a chance to see a letter of appreciation. And there's one in here today that is from one of our water meter replacement employees named Jeremy. Received a very kind thank you note from a very quiet, self-described resident who took the time to write in, and that he had said at least twice as he was doing this and explaining the water meter to her and all sorts of background information that had never been provided to her before, how much he loved his job. So I think we see when we have a DPW director come up here, our city clerk, folks that are in their element, in their public servanthood, there's a lot of that in the city of Troy, and it's something as a tax-paying resident that I value, that we have employees that serve us with such enthusiasm. I mean, we could have Aileen, if we wanted to, we could have a lot of fun with her and just keep pummeling her with questions, and she would sit and explain to us for the next 4 hours, and would love every minute of it. She just loves the work, and so does her team. And it was nice to see this letter with an employee that's not necessarily in here or encountering city council in any way, but that's the stuff I'm talking about right there that makes our city a wonderful place to live in, to work in, to play in, and to be in. So I really value that, and I was glad to see that letter in the packet tonight.
Thank you, Councilmember Hoderick. Additional comments on the reports? I'll just mention for our residents here from Shoreline Drive, there is a report referenced in our agenda. I hope you saw it. From the perspective of council, or from my perspective anyway, I was pleased to see the steps city administration's taking. I hope that they will continue to work with you to resolve this issue. I don't feel like at this point it's appropriate for me to jump in and order more trees or to do anything like that. I think that we need to let the process play out a little bit. I know you're raising your hand. I can't let you speak this evening. That's not a...
You signed up.
Okay, you're not on our list.
Signed up. Young lady took it down in handwriting.
All right, well, give me a moment then. I'll have you speak during public comment for items on or not on the agenda, even though you are a Troy resident, but we'll do it in that next section. It's not appropriate to do it right here. So we'll come back to that. So I'll stop with what I was saying then, and then we will go ahead and move on to council comments. Councilmember Hoderick.
One of the things that we've been working so hard on that was referenced tonight several times were our prep sessions, the study sessions we've done leading up to the advance in November. That is critical to our budget planning. I know residents really are interested in knowing what we're doing and being able to find that information. I know where to go for it because they're attached to all our agendas, and we can find that if you know what you're doing, you can find it. But I was wondering, Acting City Manager Bruner, if it's possible that all of that information could be captured somewhere that's logical when you look at it and the staff looks at it on the city website. Maybe it's the city manager's page, city council's page, the budget finance page, where all of these items are, including even the survey results maybe from tonight, and even past data that it's not even just the recent couple months, but there's a lot of past data points that we use in our decision making. That way, if somebody's asking us what we're looking at and thinking about if we can provide them a one-stop place on the city website, that would be very helpful to the spirit of transparency that we're trying to have. Would that be possible, do you think?
Yes, and we've talked about it internally and haven't executed it yet. Maybe now that I'm done creating PowerPoint presentations, at least for the short term, I can devote some attention to that.
I don't know if you need to seek consensus, but...
We have consensus from council for that, I'm sure we do, but okay. Consensus is given in. Good point. Thank you, Councilmember Hoderick. Additional council comments? Councilmember Chamberlain-Crainga.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. On that point, I think we'd also mentioned in one of the sessions, it'd be great to have some of those PowerPoints in hard copy form in the library. Some folks, they just prefer to see it in a hard copy, and so just, if that's something that as you think about different ideas, to think about the different mediums by which people receive information would be helpful. Other just quick comment. Just want to thank Councilmember Hoderick for reminding us, what can happen in Lansing during lame duck sessions. Was thinking of the small cell legislation, I believe it was Act 365, happened during a lame duck session. And just to remind folks that, along with our great legislators who are looking out for us and locals, is we have the Michigan Municipal League. Like, that is their job to fight for us. And I'm happy to commit to sharing. I receive every Monday legislative updates from the league, and so I'm happy to share that with my colleagues as well, so you can have those every week to see what's on tap. I know they also went through it today. There was a live with the league. I was in work, so I couldn't attend it. They do different sessions where you can hear the latest in terms of legislation that is concerning to us as locals to follow. But I'm happy to commit to sharing that with you all as well as helpful.
Thank you, Councilmember Chamberlain-Crainga. Appreciate that. Any additional council comments? Just a reminder to sign up for the Frightful 5K. If you sign up by October 16th, you'll get early bird pricing, $25. It goes up, I think, to $35 the next week, and then day of, which is October 23rd, I think it's $45. So it's a pretty good price by the 16th. Looking forward to that as always. And that's it for council comments for me tonight. So I apologize for not having you signed up to speak earlier. It didn't come through our system. It is now on here. Mr. Asvet is anyway. So it just popped up about 15 seconds ago. So we'll go ahead and do you here for public comment, even though it is for an item on the agenda. If you go ahead and come forward, of course, state your name. You have 3 minutes as previously in our rules and we've talked about before. Good to see you. So my apologies for that misunderstanding.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My wife is out of town. She saw the video and she thanks you for your apology on behalf of the city for what she's experienced. We thank the council members. I mean, we could see your obvious concern about this issue at the last meeting. Thank you for that. We thank the city administration, the golf course staff who've done quite a bit to get things moving. Mr. Bruner for helping us navigate city government. Our top concern is that the hole in the trees gets closed. Now, we saw some beautiful renderings, even a video of how wonderful Troy's going to look in the future. For the price of a couple of those renderings, we can make sure that that hole is completely closed. Very simple, $300 a tree. So right now, the proposal is to put 5 brand new 2.5-inch trunk trees versus 5 mature trees that have fallen. At the rate they're falling, I don't know how long till many more trees need to be replaced. So I would just ask that the direction be given that that hole is completely closed by the time the golf season starts. Very simple. Thank you.
Appreciate your request and for coming forward. And again, sorry for the misunderstanding. Any council response or administration reply? All right. There's no closed session this evening, so with that, we are adjourned.